Hi, my name is Rebecca Peyton, and in this presentation, I will share an overview of my signature project titled The Effects of Social Emotional Learning on Aggression and Academic Engagement in Early Childhood Special Education Students. This study focuses on a kindergarten through second grade self contained special education classroom. Frequent aggressive behaviors and low engagement that were disruptive to behavior were noted. The purpose of this project is to describe that problem, review research on social emotional learning, and propose a CASEL aligned social emotional learning intervention program that could reduce aggression and improve academic engagement and achievement amongst these students. We look at that core competency wheel from collaborative for academic, social, and emotional learning to look at the 5 competency areas that we will talk about later in regards to social emotional learning. This is our baseline data, and this chart shows the number of aggressive incidents for each of the 9 students during 1 week of baseline data. During that 1 week, there were 29 instances of aggressive behavior, with some students having a higher count. These behaviors did interrupt lessons, pulled adult attention away from instruction, and impacted peers. This baseline data does help confirm that aggression was a persistent problem and that a structured plan to support self regulation and classroom engagement was needed. The core problem in the classroom is a combination of high aggression and weak social regulation amongst the kindergarten through second grade students with disabilities. These behaviors do lead to lost instructional time and make it harder for students to access the general education program and build positive peer relationships. The purpose of this study is to evaluate whether a structured CASEL aligned social emotional learning routine can reduce aggressive incidents and improve both academic engagement and achievement for these students over time. The main research question is, how does a classroom social emotional learning intervention program affect aggression and academic engagement in a kindergarten through second grade self contained special education classroom? The hypothesis is that implementing a daily social emotional lesson and routines will help reduce aggressive incidents and increase student engagement and academic performance. If social emotional learning builds self awareness and self management, we expect to see fewer outbursts and more on task behaviors, which should create more time for academic content and instruction and lead to better academic outcomes and achievement scores. Aggressive behaviors in early childhood is often linked to gaps in self regulation and executive functioning. Students may have trouble managing emotions, delaying impulses, and solving problems with peers. There is research that shows that early self regulation predicts later social skills, school readiness, and academic achievement, including reading and math performance. The CASEL framework that I mentioned earlier describes 5 core social emotional learning competencies: self awareness, self management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. By targeting these 5 competencies in a structured way, we can address the underlying skills that drive aggressive behaviors and lower student engagement. Several studies support social emotional learning as a way to improve behavior in academics. Meta-analysis of universal social emotional learning programs show that students in those programs tend to have fewer behavior problems and better academic outcomes compared to peers without being in a social emotional learning program. There's also longitudinal work that finds that preschoolers who have social emotional learning skills predict later reading, engagement, and social behavior. Other authors include notes that social emotional learning can be especially important for students who face multiple stressors and for those students with disabilities. Overall, the research Research suggests that social emotional learning is a promising approach to addressing aggression and engagement issues in a self contained special education classroom. Our action plan is a quantitative pre-test and a post-test classroom study. The sample is of 9 students in one self-contained classroom. All students in the class will participate since the behavior problem exists at the classroom level and intervention will be part of the regular instruction. The proposed timeline is an 8-week period. Week 1 will be your baseline data collection. Week 2 through 7 will be your social emotional learning intervention period. And then week 8 will be post-testing. The length is long enough to see patterns in behavior and academic progress while also being a realistic goal for school settings. The action plan also includes intervention, data tools, and collaboration. There will be a 30-minute daily social emotional learning lesson that is aligned to the competencies. In addition, a social emotional language and strategies will be embedded into transitions, problem solving and classroom discussions. For data collection, multiple tools will be used. Logs will track the number of aggressive incidents per student. There will be weekly curriculum-based measures in reading and math that will track academic performance. Observational data such as momentary time sampling. It will track the on-task behaviors. There will be fidelity checks that will help document whether the social emotional lessons are implemented as planned. Collaboration is essential. The classroom teacher and paraprofessionals that help deliver social emotional learning lessons and record data must communicate effectively. A special education coordinator or administrator can also support training, monitor fidelity, and help problem solve barriers during the intervention process. Ethically, this project is minimal risk. All activities fit within the scope of appropriate classroom practices. No services in the students' IEPs will be removed or reduced. Parents will be informed, and the school or university processes would be followed for consent. Validity. We define aggressive behaviors clearly. We will be doing fidelity checklist, and we will have consistent data routines. It will be a small sampling in a single classroom. There are some limitations, such as a small sample with no control group, as well as potential teacher bias for logs and for student absences. Connection to student achievement. This project connects directly to student achievement by reducing aggression and improving self-regulation through social emotional learning intervention. It should increase on-task time during reading and math, which will support growth in these areas. We expect to see fewer aggressive incidents and more consistent participation in instruction. For a long-term goal, students who build that social emotional learning skills may show stronger academic progress and better social relationships over time. Because this is a proposal study, any results are projected. Based on this research, I would expect to see a clear decrease in the total number of aggressive behaviors from baseline to post-test, and an increase in the CBM reading and math scores, as well as a higher percentage of on-task behavior. A meaningful change might be, for example, cutting weekly class aggression incidents by half and seeing steady trends of progress monitoring graphs on those CBM data. There are several strengths in this plan. It targets both behavior and academics. It uses multiple data sources and aligns the intervention with well-established social emotional framework. There are some gaps. The study lacks a comparison or control group. which makes it harder to be certain that any improvement is due to the social emotional learning rather than other factors. Reliability of observations could be improved by adding a second observer for some of the sessions, as well as the proposed timeline is short, so lengthening that would gain more data. If I revise this plan, I would consider adding a delayed start design with another classroom if possible. I would extend the data collection period to include follow-ups, providing more structured training and coaching for staff on social emotional practices before the intervention actually began. Moving forward, the next steps would be to implement this social emotional learning plan with fidelity in the classroom and to collect the plan data. Afterwards, the results would be shared with the special education team and school administration. If the outcomes are positive, the school might consider adapting the social emotional learning model for other classrooms, especially those serving students with similar needs in a self-contained setting. This project contributes to the field by adding practice-based evidence on social emotional learning, especially in the early childhood education setting. It connects behavior support directly to reading and math outcomes and supports the idea that social emotional learning can be embedded as part of the core instruction. I have listed several references that I used. Thank you.